back. This is regarding Donald Trump's hush money trial. The defense has rested without Donald Trump taking the witness stand. The prosecutors say they have no rebuttal witnesses, so both sides have rested now. The jury has been sent home until May 28th. That's next week. And that is when closing arguments are expected. I want to bring in Stephen Farnsworth now. He's a political science professor at the University of Mary Washington. Good morning. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
So I want to begin by getting your reaction to the fact that Trump, despite what he said early on, did not take the stand. What do you make of that?
Well, this really wasn't a surprise to anyone. Donald Trump always says he's going to do something, and he doesn't end up doing it when it involves testifying under oath. He didn't testify for the Mueller report. He didn't testify before Congress with the January 6th investigation. He didn't testify in the previous trial involving the previous civil issues involving Stormy Daniels, and he didn't testify here. There's great risk with Donald Trump testifying that he would say something that would create a perjury charge, but it would also open him to cross-examination, and that might put forward a lot of evidence that the Trump defense does not want put forward.
So the jury will begin deliberations next week. What are your thoughts going into, first of all, this week off after a wild day in court yesterday, and then after the long holiday weekend, they will sit down and they will decide the fate of Trump on this case?
Well, certainly if the evidence is any indication, it's going to be a very hard case for the defense to prevail. They have offered very few witnesses on the defense side, very few arguments. The main argument that the defense is arguing is that the former lawyer for the former president, Michael Cohen, is simply not credible. That's fine, but it's not sufficient to deal with all the other evidence that's out there. The National Enquirer editor, people who are in the Trump circle, including top aide Hope Hicks. These are people who provided a lot of evidence, and there are also records that also suggest that there was a pattern here where Donald Trump was very clearly trying to figure out a way to keep the issues of his personal life private in advance of the 2016 election. It's going to be a very difficult case if it's a matter of evidence. But there's also the issue that the jury is always, in an American courtroom, given wide latitude to ignore evidence that they choose to ignore. So even though if you look at this objectively, scientifically, you look at the evidence that was provided by the prosecution and the real paucity of evidence provided by the defense, you might be inclined to say that there's a conviction coming. But don't bet on a jury. Never bet on a jury.
And all it takes is one person. One jury.
That's absolutely right. This process of 12 people, one of them may very well be resistant to any argument that Trump has committed a crime. Now, there's a lot of vetting that goes into the process of selecting these jurors, but in some cases, elections are won and lost based on jury selection.
Do you think the Trump team is nervous?
It's striking how little evidence they put forward. This is not unlike the impeachment defenses. But in the case of the impeachment defenses, when Trump was president or the former president and his future was being decided by the U.S. Senate, they knew they had people in their pocket. They had a Republican base that was going to support the former president or the current president in the first impeachment without much in the way of effort on their part. This is not the same situation, even though the same strategy of minimal defense efforts are being employed here. It's really a strikingly difficult environment to imagine why this was the strategy that the defense team employed. My guess is that Donald Trump simply wants this over with so he can get out campaigning again. And if he is convicted, he'll be able to argue that he's been put upon once again.
But if he is convicted, then what, Stephen? What happens to the former president?
Well, there will be appeals, and so it's not as if Donald Trump is going to immediately end up in jail or something like that. He'll be facing voters, many of whom have already made up their minds about Trump one way or the other. Will he be suffering in the court of public opinion for a conviction if it happens? Perhaps so. But remember, it's only going to involve a sliver of Republican voters. Maybe in the range of 5% of Republicans might have second thoughts. Polls show that nearly every Republican supporting Trump now would support him if there was a conviction as well.
I'm thinking more of the undecideds and those people who will be watching the debate at the end of June.
Well, absolutely. There's a sliver of voters in America who are undecided. We're looking at well under 10% of the population that's genuinely up for grabs in this election. But these are also people who might not turn out at all. If they don't care about politics all that much and they don't have an opinion one way or the other about Joe Biden or Donald Trump, they may very well not go to the trouble of voting at all. So it's a very, very tight election, conviction or no conviction, as we're going into this process. It'll, I think, create greater interest in the debates, because one of the things that happens in these debates, if they do occur, is an unfiltered experience of seeing what Donald Trump says, what Joe Biden says, and either candidate could have a good night or a bad night in a no holds barred format like that.
Stephen Farnsworth, thanks so much. Stephen, I don't know why I'm hearing people question whether or not debate is going to move forward. Don't we have a date on the calendar?
We have a date on the calendar, but Donald Trump doesn't always stick with this. There may be new conditions, new restrictions placed in this process that one side or the other will not find acceptable. And so I would say that anything involving Donald Trump, don't believe it until he steps on the stage or he steps on the witness stand.
Indeed. Point taken. Stephen Farnsworth is a political science professor at the University of Mary Washington. Thanks so much.